On the night of July 31st, 2022, 3 teenagers climbed into a vehicle in Strongsville, Ohio, expecting what should have been a normal late-night drive. Within minutes, that drive would turn into one of the most controversial and emotionally debated true crime cases in recent American history. The case would later dominate headlines, flood social media timelines, and eventually become the focus of Netflix's documentary, The Crash. Even years later, people continue arguing over the same chilling question. Was this a tragic accident caused by reckless driving, or was it an intentional act of murder? At the center of the case was 17-year-old Mackenzie Shirilla. Riding with her that night were her boyfriend, Dominic Russo, and their friend, Davian Flanagan. To outsiders, they appeared like ordinary teenagers spending time together during summer break. There were no obvious signs that the night would end in catastrophe. But according to investigators, something happened in those final moments behind the wheel that transformed a teenage crash into a murder investigation. Shortly before dawn, emergency responders were dispatched to the scene of a horrific collision. A vehicle had slammed directly into a commercial building at extreme speed. When police and paramedics arrived, the destruction was almost unimaginable. The front of the car had been crushed beyond recognition. Debris was scattered across the area. The impact had been so violent that investigators immediately understood this was not a normal collision. Dominic Russo and Davian Flanagan were pronounced dead from the crash. Mackenzie Shirilla survived with severe injuries and was rushed to the hospital. At first, the public reaction followed a familiar pattern. People assumed it was another heartbreaking case of teenage speeding, a terrible decision with irreversible consequences. News reports initially described it as a fatal high-speed crash involving young drivers. Memorials began appearing for the 2 boys who had lost their lives. Friends and family posted emotional tributes online. Communities mourned. But while the public focused on grief, investigators began reconstructing the final seconds before impact, and what they discovered would completely change the direction of the case. Modern vehicles contain sophisticated electronic systems capable of recording driving data before collisions. Investigators analyzed what is commonly referred to as black box data, information showing speed, acceleration, braking, steering movements, and driver inputs moments before the crash. Prosecutors later revealed that the car had accelerated to nearly 93 miles per hour on a suburban road before impact. But speed alone was not what shocked investigators most. According to crash reconstruction experts, there was no evidence that the driver attempted to brake before crashing into the building. No skid marks, no sudden steering correction, no visible attempt to avoid the collision. Prosecutors argued that the car continued accelerating directly toward the wall without hesitation. That detail became the foundation of the prosecution's case. They argued this was not reckless driving, it was intentional. Prosecutors claimed Mackenzie deliberately drove the vehicle into the building with the intent to kill herself and the passengers inside. The accusation stunned the country because it transformed the narrative overnight. Suddenly, this was no longer a story about speeding teenagers. It became a possible murder-suicide involving a 17-year-old girl. The defense immediately challenged that theory. Mackenzie's attorneys argued there was another explanation that prosecutors were ignoring. According to the defense, Mackenzie suffered from a medical condition called POTS, short for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. The condition can cause dizziness, rapid heartbeat, fainting, and loss of consciousness. Defense attorneys suggested she may have experienced a medical episode moments before the crash, causing her to black out behind the wheel. They argued there was no confession, no suicide note, no explicit threat, and no direct statement proving she intended to kill anyone. To them, prosecutors were building a murder case entirely from interpretation. But prosecutors believed the evidence told a much darker story. Investigators began examining Mackenzie's emotional state, her relationship with Dominic Russo, her behavior before the crash, and her communications leading up to that night. Reports suggested there had been emotional tension between Mackenzie and Dominic. Prosecutors argued the crash occurred during a period of emotional instability and conflict. They presented digital evidence and behavioral analysis to support their claim that the collision was deliberate rather than accidental. As details emerged online, the case exploded across social media platforms. TikTok creators, YouTube commentators, Reddit communities, and true crime channels became obsessed with analyzing every aspect of the story. Body cam footage from the scene circulated widely online. courtroom clips went viral. Thousands of people began conducting their own unofficial investigations from behind computer screens. Every facial expression Mackenzie made during trial was analyzed. Every statement from attorneys became part of internet debates. Some viewers believed the evidence clearly pointed toward intentional murder. Others believed the prosecution was overreaching and turning a traumatic crash into something sinister. The psychological side of the case became especially controversial. Online audiences debated whether Mackenzie's behavior after the crash reflected guilt, trauma, shock, or emotional numbness. Body language experts on social media claimed they could detect deception in courtroom footage. Other creators criticized those interpretations as dangerous pseudoscience. The internet essentially transformed the case into a giant psychological experiment where millions of strangers attempted to determine intent based on fragments of video clips and emotional reactions. What made the case even more unsettling for many people was Mackenzie's age. She was only 17 years old at the time of the crash. Some people viewed her as a manipulative teenager capable of intentional violence. Others viewed her as a traumatized young person whose life had been permanently destroyed by a tragic accident. This divide fueled nonstop arguments online. The case stopped being just about evidence. It became about how society interprets emotion, trauma, youth, mental state, and accountability. When Netflix released, the crash public fascination intensified all over again. The documentary presented dramatic footage, courtroom testimony, emotional interviews, and detailed crash analysis designed to immerse viewers directly into the controversy. Millions watched the documentary and immediately split into opposing camps. Some viewers believed the documentary proved Mackenzie's guilt beyond any doubt. Others walked away convinced there was still reasonable uncertainty surrounding the case. Once again, social media became flooded with debates, theories, reaction videos, and psychological breakdowns. The documentary also highlighted how modern true crime culture has changed. Cases are no longer discussed only inside courtrooms. Today, millions of people participate in investigations digitally through social media. Public opinion forms in real time. Algorithms push emotional reactions to the top. Dramatic clips spread faster than nuanced analysis. In the case of Mackenzie Shirilla, internet discussion became almost as famous as the case itself. During trial proceedings, prosecutors repeatedly emphasized the driving data showing acceleration without braking. They argued that the absence of evasive action proved intent. Defense attorneys countered by insisting that black box data alone could not reveal what was happening physically or mentally inside the driver's body during those final seconds. The courtroom battle ultimately centered around one invisible concept: intent. Not whether the crash happened, everyone agreed it did. The real question was whether the crash was a conscious decision. In 2023, after reviewing testimony and forensic evidence, the judge delivered the verdict. Mackenzie Shirilla was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. The decision immediately reignited national debate. Supporters of the verdict argued justice had been served for Dominic Russo and Davian Flanagan. Critics questioned whether prosecutors had proven intent beyond reasonable doubt. The controversy surrounding the case only grew larger after sentencing. For the families involved, however, the online debates represented only a small part of the tragedy. 2 young men had lost their lives forever. Parents lost sons, friends lost people they grew up with. Entire futures disappeared in seconds. Behind every viral headline and documentary clip was a real human loss that permanently changed multiple families forever. Even today, the case continues haunting public discussion because there is something deeply disturbing about its uncertainty. Many people cannot stop thinking about those final moments inside the car. What was Mackenzie thinking? Did she intend to crash? Did she lose consciousness? Did emotion override judgment in a split second? Or was it simply reckless driving that spiraled into catastrophe? The terrifying truth is that only one person truly knows what happened during those final seconds before impact. And that uncertainty is exactly why the case continues gripping millions of people around the world. One violent crash on a quiet suburban road became more than a criminal case. It became a national argument about intent, psychology, digital evidence, trauma, and truth itself. 2 teenagers never came home that night. One teenager lost the rest of her future behind prison walls. And years later, America is still asking the same question it asked from the very beginning. Was it murder, or was it a tragic accident that the world refused to see as one?